Empire.
Welcome to Inside the Cap. I'm your host, Joel Corey. You can find me on Twitter at CoreyJoel, CorryJoel. And you can read my regular Agents Take column at CBSSports.com. This week we're going to look at two things. The Orlando Brown Jr. trade to the Kansas City Chiefs, and also look at a couple other guys who could be traded in the days leading up to the NFL draft or during the draft, and a couple of guys that we're pretty sure that they've been subject to trade rumors that probably won't. Now, on Friday, we saw the Baltimore Ravens trade their right tackle, Orlando Brown Jr., to the Kansas City Chiefs. The Ravens get the Chiefs' first-round pick, which is 31st overall, 2021 third-round pick, 94th. Fourth round pick, 136th, and the Ravens get this. The Ravens get that, and a 2022 fifth round pick. The Chiefs get Brown, a 2021 second round pick, 58th overall, and a 2022 sixth round pick. The reason the Ravens were willing to trade Brown is because he's made it very clear he does not want to be a right tackle. When Ronnie Stanley got hurt middle of last year, he stepped in and played left tackle. His dad, Orlando Brown Sr., was a left tackle for both the Cleveland Browns and the Baltimore Ravens in the 90s. So you could either let him play out his rookie contract, he was going to make $3.384 million, then let him walk in free agency because he's not going to sign to be your right tackle, and you pick up at best a third-round compensatory pick in 2023. Now, depending upon what draft valuation chart you look at, under the Jimmy Johnson one, which is a little outdated or antiquated, you net out all the picks, basically, in this how Kansas City is reportedly viewing it, that it was the 45th overall pick is what they gave up. Now, if you look at some of the more modern charts, depending upon which one you look at, the range is in the latter teens to mid 20s is first round pick is what was given up. Kansas City has completely overhauled their offensive line from last year, and we saw in the Super Bowl not having either tackle that started the season, Eric Fisher, Mitchell Schwartz, just made life difficult for Patrick Mahomes. So they've got presumably the left tackle for the future in Orlando Brown, and the centerpiece of their line overhaul was going out and making Joe Thuney the highest paid offensive guard in NFL history. $16 million per year, $80 million over 5 years, of $46.89 million in guarantees. Kyle Long's come out of retirement to be the right guard, presumably. You've got Duvernay Tardif coming back, Laurent Duvernay Tardif coming back from opting out of COVID around as well. So we'll see how this revamped line works. Fisher won't be back, definitely. Torn Achilles in the playoffs. Says he's starting to get a lot of interest. The Browns are rumored to be signing former Steelers tackle, who was a left tackle, Alejandro Villanueva, after May 3rd, so he doesn't factor into the compensatory pick equation, to be their right tackle. But the Chiefs, great move for them in terms of helping shore up the offensive line. Now, what does this do for the cap? Baltimore ends up netting about $2.56 million in cap room because Brown's $3.384 million salary comes off the books. Somebody else has to come in to the top 51, so they don't pick up $3.84 million because so he's part of the top 51. He leaves the 50 players. Somebody else takes his place. And according to NFLPA data, the Ravens had about $12.6 million of cap space prior to the trade. You add this basically 2.56, they're at pretty much $15,170,000, give or take a couple $1,000. So 15.17 basically where they're at Kansas City, according to FLPA data, had about 12.56 million of cap space. Now he comes in, his $3.384 million comes onto the books, and someone who was in the top 51 comes out. So basically it's a loss of about $2.534 million of cap space. So that's going to put Kansas City at just a shade over $10 million in cap space. Now, you only have a small sample size of Brown playing left tackle. And one of the things which is supposedly part of the deal is they're not going to talk about an extension. That's according to Mike Garafolo of NFL Media, although Adam Schefter said that there could be talks down the road or to get a deal done. But let's say he plays out his contract. You'll know definitively how good of a left tackle it is. And once he took over for an injured Ronnie Stanley last year, didn't give up a sack, didn't give up a hit in the 389 pass blocking snaps he took at left tackle. That's according to Pro Football Focus. So if that's the Orlando Brown you were getting, then you probably wanted to get that deal done sooner rather than later. And the thing is, getting a deal done right now, you got to think that for a guy who doesn't turn 25 until next week or May 2nd, you got a guy in offensive tackles have long shelf lives. He's looking at that Ronnie Stanley deal. I can't imagine that that's not something that is on his radar screen. That he wants to top the deal that Ronnie Stanley got last year, middle of last season, right before he got hurt, who was a All-Pro, first-team All-Pro in 2019. Stanley signed for $98.75 million over 5 years, averaging $19.75 million on his extension. Deal maxes out at $100 million through incentives. Had the most overall guarantees in an offensive lineman contract, a shade over $66.5 million. Fully guaranteed, $58.8 million, fully guaranteed at signing. But I got to think that's an important deal to him because that's the reason why he wanted out of town. And quite frankly, that deal didn't come in where I thought it would. I thought it would be closer to the Laramie Tunsil deal. Tunsil signed for $22 million per year right around this time last year. It was announced second day of the draft, on the Friday of the draft. So that deal was a little underwhelming. So if you want to get a deal done now, that's probably where you would have to go. Now, if you wait, and we've seen that several teams have waited, if he plays like he did in that run-heavy Baltimore offense, so you don't have a huge sample size because one, they were so run-heavy. Kansas City is more pass-happy, so there are going to be more opportunities for him to be pass blocking. But if that's an indication of what he is at a left tackle, you're making a mistake by not getting the deal done now, because you're probably going to have to make him the highest paid tackle if you wait and he plays well. And right now, on average, that's that kind of misleading Trent Williams deal with the 49ers. And the agent's not going to say it's misleading. He's going to say, hey, 6 years, averages $23.01 million. That's our benchmark. Otherwise, it'd be David Bakhtiari at $23 million per year. But that's where you're probably going to have to go if you wait. If you wait and don't do the deal sooner rather than later. And we've seen that happen previously. Amari Cooper, Dallas traded for him in 2018, didn't get a deal done, and when he did re-sign him as a free agent, $20 million per year, second highest paid receiver. Laramie Tunsil, when he was traded from the Dolphins to the Texans, deal didn't get done, became the first $20 million per year offensive lineman. Jalen Ramsey, traded in the middle of the 2019 season from the Jaguars to the Rams. Deal was not a part of the equation. Right before the start of the regular season, first $20 million per year corner. Trent Williams traded during the draft last year from the Washington football team to the 49ers. And they couldn't franchise him either. That was an adjustment made to his contract. Ronnie Stanley hadn't been done. There's only one $20 million per year guy, Laramie Tunsil, highest paid lineman in league history. And this is something you're going to probably see surface with Jamal Adams. They gave up basically 2 first-round picks to get him. He don't want to be viewed just as a safety because he set the sack record for defensive backs last year, even though he's much stronger in run support than in coverage. There weren't any $15 million per year safeties. Now there are. So that whole thing is going to crop up again. So the moral of the story to me is if you give up significant draft capital for a player and he's a Pro Bowl caliber player and he's heading into a contract year, there are years remaining on the contract, it's going to cost you more the longer you wait to get the deal done. So we haven't seen it happen really since Khalil Mack. You had a guy go for significant draft capital and a deal was done simultaneous to the trade. I think that was really the last time you saw that happen, and that was a couple of years ago when Khalil Mack became, I think that was 2018, I believe, when he became the highest paid non-quarterback at $23.5 million. A few days after Aaron Donald signed for $22 million per year, an extension with the Rams. But we'll see who's right. Adam Schefter, who said they are going to work on something, or Mike Garofalo, who said they haven't planned to play out the final year of the contract. Obviously, they could franchise him. That's something that they have a right to do. And if you look at where the franchise number could be, let's assume that the cap gets back to $200 million next year. In 2020, when the cap was $198.2 million, the offensive line number was $14.781 million. And I've kind of run the numbers to see where it might be if you're at $200 million. So you're talking like shade under $16 million is where his franchise tag number would be. Now, they could use that in negotiation to try to depress the salary, but that's not really how those things work when you got the top of the market at one place and the tag number at another place. We saw that with Justin Houston years ago, that the linebacker tag didn't really have a lot of relevance into the deal he signed. He became the second highest paid non-quarterback, or defensive player, I should say, when he signed his deal, when he got a long-term deal done after the Chiefs franchised him, I believe, in 2015. But that is an option. They can stick the tag on him and then go from there. But in any event, the Chiefs plan on having a very high-paid left side of the line. Tooney, highest paid guard for now, which is going to be eclipsed by Brandon Scherf if the Washington football team gets a deal done with him instead of him playing out a second franchise tag, or if Quentin Nelson gets a deal done with the Colts. And whenever you do Orlando Brown, he's going to be way up there in the stratosphere for highest paid offensive lineman. So Chiefs will continue to be cap heavy. The good thing is that Patrick Mahomes' contract has huge roster bonuses each year, so you can keep kicking the can down the road like they did this year and go from there. But the end result is the Chiefs have shored up the offensive line in their overhaul this year, and they could be making a mistake by waiting to get a deal done, because if Orlando Brown is what they think he is, it's going to cost them more money in the long run.
Microsoft Teams is helping a bicycle company reinvent the way that they work.
We make bicycles for everyday riders. Once the pandemic hit, we started doing virtual visits.
All of a sudden, we could open up our showroom to customers around the world.
Learn more at Microsoft.com/Teams.
What's up? It's Mike Jones from the Football Jones Podcast. I know you're enjoying your time with Inside the Cap, but once you're done, I want to invite you to come over and check out my podcast. Each week, we take a deep dive into some of the most pressing topics around the NFL. High-profile guests from the coach, player, and front office ranks, as well as the top league insiders. Check out the Football Jones Podcast, another fine product brought to you by Empire Media.
Okay, now let's turn our attention to a couple of players that could be traded leading up to the NFL draft or at some point during the NFL draft. First up is Teddy Bridgewater. The Carolina Panthers acquiring Sam Darnold recently makes Teddy Bridgewater expendable. His representation has been given permission to shop for a trade. The most logical destination would be the Denver Broncos, and that's because the assistant GM, the current GM, George Payton, was the assistant GM with the Minnesota Vikings when Teddy Bridgewater was drafted in the first round there. Thing is, the Broncos could be in a position if they want to take a quarterback in the first round. They might be there. There might be one there. Assuming Mac Jones goes third to San Francisco, because we know Trevor Lawrence goes 1. Zach Wilson supposedly goes 2. That's going to leave either Trey Lance or Justin Fields potentially still available at 9. And the question becomes, do the the Denver Broncos, pull the trigger on a quarterback there? If they don't, then maybe sometime Friday or early Saturday, Bridgewater becomes a Denver Bronco. Part of the problem is that nobody is going to want to have his $18 million salary, acquire that, absorb it. So he's going to have to be flexible compensation-wise. Denver does have enough cap room to absorb the full salary. They got a little over $27 million in cap room, but can't see them wanting to pay him his full salary. The going rate for a bridge quarterback, which is what Bridgewater would be, he'd come in to, if not start, compete with Drew Lock, the second-round pick a couple of years ago, who has not looked like he is a definitive starting quarterback. That bridge contract amount is the $10.5 million range that you saw Andy Dalton and Ryan Fitzpatrick get. Dalton from the Chicago Bears and Fitzpatrick from the Washington football team. Those deals have like about $3 million to $3.5 million of upside through incentives. So Bridgewater would have to do kind of like Trent Brown did when he was traded from the Raiders to the Patriots and reworked his deal where he makes less money than he was scheduled to make this year. So I'd say around that range, and maybe they lop off the 2022 contract year, which he has, or it would be Carolina having to eat salary on the way out the door, where they would convert some portion into signing bonus to lessen the cap obligation for the acquiring team, presumably Denver. If they don't do that and he's traded, there's $10 million of dead money from the signing bonus he got from the $15 million signing bonus. There's $10 million of guarantee, so Bridgewater's not going to drop below $10 million. And if they can't trade him and cut him post June 1, there's a $15 million cap hit this year, $5 million next year. So there's probably one of those two things that has to happen for a trade with Bridgewater. And that's only if the Denver Broncos don't use the 9th pick on a quarterback. If they trade back, then that Bridgewater thing seems like it might be in play. Another guy to look for is Zach Ertz, the Eagles tight end. Ertz wants out of Philly in the worst way. Philly has been looking for, from reports, like a third-round pick for Ertz, which isn't going to happen when he's coming off an injury-plagued year. Only caught 36 passes for 335 yards and 1 touchdown in 11 games last year. Missed time with an ankle injury, which kind of plagued him throughout the whole year, or the rest of the year. He's got a cap number of $12,721,500. Supposed to make $8.5 this year in cash. So if Philadelphia is able to trade him, they're going to pick up $4.952 million of cap room. Howie Roseman is going to have to be more flexible in terms of adjust his expectations if he is going to move Zach Ertz. Supposedly they're willing to move out of the 12 spot, so it wouldn't surprise me if Howie wanted to dump Ertz into that equation. Team that's been rumored for Ertz is Buffalo, but they only have $4.2 million of cap room, so can't fit $8.5 million of cash into $4.2 million of space. Something has to give through a restructure. Can't see the Eagles eating cash on this one. If I'm Jacksonville, I got $39.5 million of cap room practically. I got a rookie quarterback. Tight end can be a security blanket. I'd want Ertz. If I'm Zach Ertz, I don't want any parts of Jacksonville. Would be part of the problem. Two other teams which to me would make sense would be the Arizona Cardinals. They're going all in. Give Kyler Murray another weapon. to go with. They picked up A.J. Green, which doesn't do much for me given what he did last year. Is a weapon in the middle of the field. You have DeAndre Hopkins, toughest division in football, NFC West. They have the cap room to make it happen. Or one which I thought where it should have happened was probably should have folded Zach Ertz into the Carson Wentz deal for additional compensation. T.Y. Hilton re-signed for $8 million on a $2 million in incentives. They've got about $21.5 million of cap room. They could absorb Zach Ertz, maybe in terms of compensation of how he wants to get his third-round pick, Harry Roseman that is. Maybe it doesn't have to be a 2021 draft pick. It's conditional 22 pick, which is set at a certain level, some sort of day 3 pick. Day 3 starts fourth or fifth round pick. And if Ertz returns to form that he was the previous preseasons before the injury-plagued 2020 season, then the pick elevates to how he wants, or if he makes the Pro Bowl, or it continues to go up if he makes the Pro Bowl and Indy wins the Super Bowl. But for a reference point, Ertz caught 278 passes for 2,903 yards and 22 touchdowns, 2017 through 2019 years. Set a single-season tight end record for 116 receptions in 2018. So over those 3 years, he averaged 93 catches, basically 968 yards and 7 touchdowns. So maybe that's a way to get that thing worked out. I think you got to get Ertz out of Philly if you want to pay Dallas Goedert, who is their tight end on a go-forward basis. Because if you still have Ertz on that roster thinking you'll hold on to him and you pay Dallas Goedert, you're creating a huge problem in the locker room. Ertz won a new contract last year. Philly and Ertz's people couldn't come to an agreement. Structure was one big problem. That Travis Kelce deal, one of the worst structures I've ever seen for a player of that magnitude, was kind of what Howie wanted, and there's no way Ertz would ever take that, or any other good player should take a structure like that. But if you're going to pay Dallas Goedert upwards to or more than Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, and they got deals averaging $12.5 million a year, you better get Ertz off that roster to do that. Tight end who should want out but seems to be all in is David Njoku in Cleveland. He's the third tight end, third man on the totem pole. They kept the fifth-year option in place for $6.013 million. He's not getting a lot of opportunity. They're paying Austin Hooper $10.5 million a year. They got him in free agency last year. They drafted Harrison Bryant in the 4th round. He's number 2 tight end. Njoku improved as a blocker, which is a weak point. I probably would have traded him last year at the trading deadline someplace, but he seems to be resigned to the fact that he's in Cleveland, committed to having the best season possible. He's looking at a 1-year prove-it deal next year in free agency if he stays there as a third tight end. He's not going to get a lot of opportunity. And we saw that this year, guys going on a 1. Jared Cook, $6 million on a 1, who was a starter in New Orleans, to the Chargers, upside to make the deal worth $7.5 million through incentives. We saw Gerald Everett go from the Rams to the Chargers. $6 million on a 1, $7 million is what the deal maxes out. Not to the Chargers. He went to the Seahawks. So $7 million is what the deal maxes out to be. A guy that I thought might have been traded but hasn't, Stephon Gilmore. Gilmore had that partially torn quad, which required surgery. Everyone just assumed that he would have been traded. Supposedly he was on the trading block last year before the trading deadline, and the Patriots wanted a first-round pick. This one is interesting to me because if they're going to move up to get a quarterback from 15, maybe they would throw him into the mix, potentially to a team. He's got a cap number of $16,265,503. He's supposed to make $7,911,765 cash. So if he's off the books, Patriots would pick up $8,341,738 in cap room. Now, one of the things is that Bill Belichick has had what I call the true Patriot way. It's not do your job, and it's applied to practically every player, with the exception of Tom Brady who walked away voluntarily in free agency to Tampa Bay, that it's better to get rid of a player a year too early as opposed to a year too late, whether it's because of salary, performance of age, or age. That's been a staple what's happened in New England. Gilmore hasn't been happy with his contract. He's in the last year of a $65 million deal over 5 years. He signed in free agency, averaging $13 million per year. They reworked his contract last year right before the start of the regular season, raised his base salary by $2.5 million, gave him $2.5 million in per-game roster bonuses for each game he was active on the that's $156,250 per game. Added a $2 million incentive for being NFL Defensive Player in the Year, which Gilmore was in 2019, and his $11.5 million base salary in 2021 decreased to $7 million. There is a $411,765 roster bonus for a 17th game, which was also added in the process. So they've advanced him salary. They're going to probably have to make a choice corner-wise. The J.C. Jackson, who signed his $3.384 million second-round restricted free agent tender, would be unrestricted next year. Probably can't pay both. Problem with Gilmore, he turns 31 in September. Jackson is in his prime. Will be 26 in November. Had a breakout year. 9 picks in 2020. So you're probably going to ultimately make a choice between one of those two corners to keep on a long-term basis. I don't know about paying a corner for ages 32, 33, and 34 if you do like a 3-year extension for him. He wasn't happy at $13 million. So you had Darius Slay, who is like at 16.66, signed a 3-year extension in his trade last year from Detroit to Philly. Then you had the market escalate after that. Tre'Davious White, $17.25 million per year. Jalen Ramsey became the first $20 million per year corner, and Marlon Humphrey at $19.5. This year you had guys signing in the $13 million per range in free agency. Adoree Jackson, Shaquille Griffin, and William Jackson. So that's one that they're going to have to pick a corner at some point, I would think, before next year. One guy I don't think will be traded, Odell Beckham Jr. First, he's supposed to make $15.75 million this year. He's got 3 years left on his contract, $45.75 million over 3 years. Coming off a torn ACL. And then who has $15.75 million to absorb his salary? I think if Odell Beckham Jr. gets traded, it'll be because he and Baker Mayfield aren't on the same page during the first part of the 2021 season, and they move him before the November 2nd trading deadline. That's what I would think. You're not going to get anything remotely close to what you gave up to get him from the Giants, which essentially was, the trade was really before they combined the Olivier Vernon, Kevin Zeitler trade and lumped it into one, was Jabril Peppers was part of the trade, went to the Giants, and the Giants got first and third round picks in 2019 for Odell Beckham. So, yeah, you're not getting anything remotely close to him right now as quote-unquote damaged goods. New Orleans has to do something, to me. 2 guys on fifth-year options. Ryan Ramczyk, the right tackle, $11.064 million. Marshawn Lattimore, 10.244 fifth-year option. I don't know if it happens around the draft, but they got to do something at some point with one of those two because they can only franchise one. Also, Terron Armstead, the left tackle, is up. So they only have $529,000 of cap space. Lattimore's situation gets complicated by the fact that he has that potential felony gun charge for being stopped a couple of weeks ago back in Columbus in Ohio. Ramczyk probably wants to be the highest paid right tackle in football. That's $18 million per year. Lane Johnson, but he probably looks at that Colton Miller deal, which is slightly over that, is really like his new benchmark. Lattimore wants to be up there in the cornerback stratosphere, I would imagine, north of Tre'Davious White, but we'll see how this whole potential gun charge shakes out for him. And it seems like the Niners are going to keep Jimmy Garoppolo. That's the plan. Trading him gets even harder because who has $25.5 million of cap room to take on a salary this year? Not even the Patriots. They got about 15. So even if you wanted to try to work some sort of trade where Gilmore goes to the Niners, Garoppolo comes back, given he's making 8 practically, and there's 25.5, there's not even enough for New England to absorb that without having to restructure contracts. But they say they're going to keep him. He's got a no-trade clause anyway this year, so that to prove the trade. New England would be a place I'd assume he would approve, but seems to be that they're in a tough division win now mode. They won't be as injured as last year. It's hard to imagine them having the same injuries that they did in 2020. Then Garoppolo goes next year, and the quarterback they take at 3, presumably Mac Jones, sits for the year if they're doing well, or if they're not doing well or Garoppolo gets hurt, which has been a problem with him, then Jones would take over. But that's going to wrap it up for this week's Inside the Cap. Thanks for listening. Don't forget, you can find me on Twitter at Corey Joel, CorryJoel, and read my regular CBSSports.com column, Agents Take. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.